When my daughter Lily turned 8, she developed an unusual obsession with shadows. It started subtly at first. She would glance over her shoulder in brightly lit rooms or ask me to keep the lights on at night. I dismissed it as a typical childhood phase, perhaps a reaction to a scary movie or a ghost story shared among friends at school. But as weeks turned into months, her behavior became increasingly peculiar and worrisome. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, I noticed Lily standing motionless in the hallway, staring intently at the wall. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, and her little hands clutched the hem of her dress so tightly that her knuckles turned white. "Lily, sweetheart, what's wrong?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. She didn't respond immediately. After a moment, she turned to me slowly and whispered, "They're moving again." A chill ran down my spine. "What's moving, honey?" "The shadows," she said, barely audible. "They don't like the light." I wiped my hands on a dish towel and walked over to her, kneeling down to meet her at eye level. "Shadows can't hurt you, Lily. They're just areas where the light doesn't reach." She shook her head vigorously. "No, Mom, these shadows are different. They watch me. They follow me." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. "Did something happen at school? Did someone tell you a scary story?" She looked down, avoiding my gaze. "No, they just started appearing." I decided it was best not to press her further at that moment. "Why don't you help me set the table? Dinner's almost ready." She nodded reluctantly and followed me into the kitchen, casting quick glances back at the hallway as if expecting something or someone to emerge. That night, after tucking her into bed, I sat in the living room, pondering her words. Was this a manifestation of anxiety? Perhaps she was dealing with something she didn't know how to express. I made a mental note to speak with her teacher the next day. The following morning, I walked Lily to school. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves, and the sky was a clear, brilliant blue. "Are you excited for your art class today?" I asked, trying to lighten the mood. She shrugged. "I guess. Maybe you can draw me one of your beautiful pictures when you get home." She looked up at me, her eyes searching mine. "Mom, can you pick me up after school today? I don't want to walk home alone." I was taken aback. Lily usually loved her independence during the short walk from the bus stop. "Of course, honey. I'll be right here waiting for you." She offered a faint smile before joining her classmates lining up outside the school entrance. As soon as she was inside, I headed to the administrative office to speak with Mrs. Thompson, her teacher. "Good morning, Mrs. Adams. How can I help you?" Mrs. Thompson greeted me warmly. "Good morning. I wanted to talk to you about Lily. Have you noticed anything unusual about her behavior lately?" Mrs. Thompson's expression turned thoughtful. "Now that you mention it, she has been quieter than usual. She seems distracted during lessons and often stares out the window." I asked her if everything was all right, but she just nodded and went back to her work. I sighed. "At home, she's been talking about shadows moving and watching her. It's starting to worry me." Mrs. Thompson raised an eyebrow. "Shadows? Do you think she might have seen something that's frightened her?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out. I was hoping you might have some insight." "Well, there was an incident during recess last week," she began cautiously. "Some of the children were playing near the old oak tree at the edge of the playground. Lily came running back looking pale. I asked her what was wrong, but she wouldn't say. I felt a sense of urgency. "Do you know who she was playing with?" "I believe she was with Emily and Jacob. Perhaps you could talk to their parents." "Thank you, Mrs. Thompson. I appreciate your help." As I left the school, I couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had happened near that oak tree. Determined to get to the bottom of it, I decided to visit Emily's mother, Karen, who lived just a few blocks away. Karen welcomed me into her home, and over a cup of coffee, I broached the subject. Has Emily mentioned anything about Lily acting strangely or being scared of something at school? Karen frowned thoughtfully. Now that you mention it, Emily did say something about a game they played near the big tree. Some kind of pretend adventure with shadows or ghosts. I didn't pay much attention at the time. Did she say what happened during the game? No, but I can ask her when she gets home. Is everything all right? I hesitated before answering. I'm not sure. Lily seems genuinely frightened. She's convinced that shadows are moving and watching her. Karen reached out and touched my hand sympathetically. Kids have such vivid imaginations at this age. I'm sure it's just a phase. Maybe, I conceded, though I wasn't entirely convinced. Later that afternoon, I returned to the school to pick up Lily as promised. She seemed relieved to see me waiting by the gate. How was your day? I asked as we walked home. It was okay, she replied softly. Mrs. Thompson said you seemed distracted in class. She kicked a pebble along the sidewalk. I'm just tired. I decided to broach the subject carefully. You know, if something is bothering you, you can always tell me. She was silent for a moment before speaking. Mom, do you believe that shadows can be alive? I considered my response. I believe that sometimes our minds can play tricks on us, especially when we're scared or worried. She shook her head. It's not my mind. They whisper to me. A chill prickled at the back of my neck. What do they say? Different things. Sometimes they call my name. Other times they tell me secrets. What kind of secrets? She stopped walking and turned to face me. They said they know about the man in the basement. I felt my breath catch. What man in the basement? She looked confused. I don't know. They just said he doesn't like the light either. Our house didn't have a basement. It was a single-story bungalow with an attic used for storage. Lily, we don't have a basement. She furrowed her brow. Yes, we do. They told me. I knelt down to her level. Sweetheart, there's no basement in our house. Maybe you dreamed it. She seemed uncertain. Maybe. When we arrived home, I decided to show her the house plans to reassure her. Pulling out the old blueprints from a drawer, I spread them out on the dining table. See, this is our house. No basement, just the main floor and the attic. She studied the plans intently, tracing her finger along the lines. Suddenly, she pointed to an area beneath the living room. What's this space? I peered at the spot she indicated. It was unlabeled, just an empty void between the ground and the floor. Probably just the crawl space. That's just the foundation area, honey. Nothing but dirt and support beams. She didn't look convinced. Can we check? I hesitated. The crawl space wasn't easily accessible, and I wasn't eager to venture into a dusty, cramped area. But if it would put her mind at ease. All right, let's have a look. Fetching a flashlight from the garage, I located the small access panel on the exterior of the house. It hadn't been opened in years, and the screws were rusted. After some effort, I managed to pry it open. A musty smell wafted out, and I shone the flashlight into the darkness. Cobwebs hung from the beams, and the dirt floor was undisturbed. See? Nothing here but spiders and dust. Lily stood behind me, peering over my shoulder. Can I hold the flashlight? I handed it to her, and she directed the beam around the space. As the light swept across the far corner, she gasped. What is it? I asked, trying to see what had startled her. Over there, she whispered, pointing the light at a small, dark object partially buried in the dirt. Curiosity piqued. I crawled a short distance into the crawl space to retrieve it. Brushing off the dirt, I realized it was a worn leather-bound book. Returning outside, I examined the book more closely. The cover was faded, and the pages were yellowed with age. Opening it, I found it filled with handwritten notes, sketches, and strange symbols. What is it? Lily asked, her eyes wide. I'm not sure, I admitted. It looks like an old journal. We went back inside, and I laid the book on the kitchen table. Flipping through the pages, I tried to make sense of the scribbled handwriting. Most of it was illegible, but certain words stood out. Shadows, whispers, hidden room, protect. A shiver ran through me. Where did this come from? Lily pointed to a page with a crude drawing of a trapdoor. That's in the hallway, she said confidently. I looked at the drawing, then back at her. What do you mean? She hopped off the chair and walked to the hallway between the living room and the bedrooms. Here, she said, pointing to the floor. I followed her gaze. The hardwood floor appeared seamless, but upon closer inspection, I noticed a slight indentation, a barely perceptible outline of a square. My heart began to race. I've never noticed this before. She knelt down and ran her fingers along the edges. The shadows told me about it. I felt a mix of fear and disbelief. Lily, this is... How did you? She looked up at me with innocent eyes. They want us to find the man in the basement. I stood up abruptly. This is enough for today. Let's put the book away and focus on something else. But Mom... No, Lily, I snapped more harshly than I intended. I don't want to hear any more about shadows or basements. Her lower lip trembled, and tears welled in her eyes. I'm sorry, I softened immediately. Oh, honey, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to yell. I'm just worried. She nodded silently, wiping her eyes, pulled her into a hug. Tell you what, why don't we make some cookies? Chocolate chip, your favorite. She smiled faintly. Okay. As we gathered ingredients in the kitchen, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that our house harbored secrets I was unprepared to confront. That night, after Lily had gone to bed, I found myself drawn back to the journal. Sitting at the table, I examined it more thoroughly. On one of the last pages, I found a passage that was more legible than the rest. The shadows grow stronger. They feed on fear. The hidden room must remain sealed. It's the only way to keep him contained. I felt a cold sweat break out across my forehead. Was this some kind of elaborate hoax? Perhaps a previous owner with a penchant for the occult? Determined to get answers, I decided to investigate the trapdoor in the hallway. Fetching a toolbox from the garage, I returned to the spot Lily had indicated. Using a flathead screwdriver, I carefully pried along the edges of the concealed panel. With a creak, it lifted slightly, revealing a small handle recessed into the wood. My hands trembled as I grasped the handle and pulled. The panel lifted to reveal a narrow staircase descending into darkness. A gust of cold air rushed up, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and something else. A metallic odor that made me recoil. Shining the flashlight down the steps, I called out, "Hello? Is anyone there?" Only silence answered. I knew I should close the panel and forget this ever happened, but curiosity and a sense of duty pushed me forward. If there was something beneath my home that could harm my daughter, I needed to know. Taking a deep breath, I began to descend the stairs. The steps creaked under my weight, and the air grew colder with each step. At the bottom, the narrow passage opened into a small room. The walls were lined with shelves cluttered with jars, old books, and unrecognizable artifacts. In the center of the room stood a wooden chair, and upon it sat a life-size doll made of burlap and straw, dressed in tattered clothes. His button eyes seemed to stare directly at me. I approached cautiously, the flashlight beam illuminating every dusty corner. As I neared the doll, I noticed symbols carved into the floor around the chair, similar to those in the journal. A sudden whisper echoed in the room, though I couldn't discern the words. My heart pounded in my chest. "Who's there?" I demanded, my voice wavering. The whispering grew louder, more insistent, overlapping voices filling the confined space. Panic surged through me. I turned to flee, but the shadows along the walls seemed to shift and coalesce, blocking my path. "Let me out!" I screamed. In the chaos, I heard Lily's voice from above. Mom? Mom? Where are you? Lily, stay upstairs, I shouted, but it was too late. I heard her footsteps descending the stairs. She appeared at the bottom, her face pale in the dim light. Mom, you shouldn't be down here. I reached out to her. Lily, we need to leave now. She shook her head slowly. They won't let us. The shadows began to swirl around us, and the whispering reached a deafening pitch. Clutching Lily's hand, I pushed through the unseen force toward the stairs. Each step felt like wading through thick mud, but sheer determination propelled us forward. We burst into the hallway, and I slammed the trapdoor shut behind us. The whispering ceased abruptly, leaving only the sound of our heavy breathing. I collapsed onto the floor, pulling Lily into my arms. What is happening? I whispered, more to myself than to her. She looked up at me with a mixture of fear and resignation. They wanted you to free him. Who? Who did they want me to free? The man in the basement. He's trapped, and they need someone to let him out. I stared at her in disbelief. How do you know this? They told me, in my dreams, and when I'm awake. I realized then that this was far beyond anything I could handle alone. We needed help. Pack a bag, Lily. We're leaving. Where will we go? Somewhere safe. Within minutes, we were in the car, speeding away from the house that had been our home. As we drove into the night, I glanced in the rearview mirror. For a brief moment, I thought I saw a figure standing in the window, a silhouette shrouded in darkness. I pressed down harder on the accelerator. The motel room was a stark contrast to our cozy home. Sterile walls, dim lighting, and the faint scent of disinfectant. Lily sat on the edge of the bed, clutching her stuffed rabbit, Mr. Whiskers. Her eyes were fixed on the muted television screen, but I could tell her mind was elsewhere. I paced the small space, phone in hand, debating my next move. Who could I call that would believe this? The police? They'd think I was unstable. A priest? We weren't religious, but perhaps this situation called for desperate measures. Mom! Lily's voice broke the silence. Are we going back home?
Ik knelt beside here.
Not tonight, sweetheart. We need to stay here for a little while. She nodded slowly. They're angry. Who is angry? I asked gently. The shadows. They didn't want us to leave. A knot tightened in my stomach. Lily, I need you to tell me everything you know about them. She hugged Mr. Whiskers tighter. They started talking to me a few weeks ago. First, they were nice. They said they wanted to be my friends. Did they tell you their names? She shook her head. They don't have names. They're just shadows. What else did they say? They told me about the man in the basement, that he was lonely and needed help. I took a deep breath. Did they tell you who he is? She hesitated. They said he used to live in our house a long time ago, that he was trapped. I recalled the journal we'd found, the warnings about keeping the hidden room sealed. Did they ever ask you to do anything? She looked down. They wanted me to open the door for him. I felt a chill run through me. Did you? She met my gaze, tears welling in her eyes. I tried, but I couldn't find the key. That's when they got angry. I wrapped my arms around her. It's not your fault, honey. You did nothing wrong. My mind raced. If this was some kind of spirit or entity attached to the house, perhaps leaving would keep us safe. But what if it followed us? I needed professional help. Stay here, I told Lily. I'm going to make a phone call. Stepping outside, I scrolled through my contacts and dialed Karen's number. She picked up on the third ring. Hello. Karen, it's Sarah. Sarah, I was just thinking about you. Emily mentioned that Lily wasn't at school today. Is everything okay? I hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. Actually, I was wondering if you could give me the number of a spiritual advisor or someone who deals with unusual situations. There was a pause. Unusual? What do you mean? I lowered my voice. I think there's something in our house. Something not natural. Are you serious? Yes. Please. I know it sounds crazy, but I need help. She was silent for a moment before speaking. I might know someone. There's a woman named Margaret. She helped my sister when she thought her house was haunted. I'll text you her number. Thank you, Karen. I really appreciate it. Of course. Let me know if there's anything else I can do. Moments later, a text came through with Margaret's contact information. Without wasting time, I dialed the number. A calm, soothing voice answered. This is Margaret. Hi, my name is Sarah Adams. I was referred to you by Karen Williams. I think my house might be haunted or possessed or something. I don't know. She listened patiently as I stumbled through an explanation of the events. The shadows, the journal, the hidden room. Can you come to the house? She asked. I'm not there right now. I left with my daughter. I was afraid. I understand. It's important that I see the place where the activity is occurring. Can you meet me there tomorrow morning? I glanced back at the motel room door. Yes, I suppose so. Good. Text me the address. We'll get to the bottom of this. Thank you, I said, relief washing over me. That night, sleep eluded me. Every creak of the motel's aging structure set my nerves on edge. Lily slept fitfully beside me, occasionally murmuring in her sleep. At one point, she whimpered, and I gently shook her awake. Mom? She mumbled, rubbing her eyes. It's okay, honey. Just a bad dream. She nodded and drifted back to sleep. I envied her ability to find rest amid the chaos. As dawn broke, painting the sky in hues of pink and orange, I prepared for the day ahead. After a quick breakfast, we checked out of the motel and headed toward our house. Pulling into the driveway, I felt a heaviness settle over me. The house stood silent, its exterior betraying none of the horrors within. Margaret arrived shortly after, a woman in her late 50s with silver-streaked hair and a warm smile that belied the seriousness of her profession. You must be Sarah, she said, extending her hand. Yes, and this is my daughter, Lily. Hello, Lily, she greeted gently. Shall we go inside? I hesitated. Are you sure it's safe? She gave a reassuring nod. We'll be fine. Unlocking the front door, we stepped into the foyer. The air inside was noticeably colder, and an unsettling silence filled the space. Margaret closed her eyes and took a deep breath. There's a presence here, strong and restless. She began to move through the house, pausing occasionally to touch a wall or peer into a room. Lily clung to my side, her eyes darting nervously. Tell me about the hidden room, Margaret prompted. It's in the hallway, I explained, leading her to the spot where the trapdoor lay concealed. We found a journal that mentioned it. Margaret examined the area. May I see the journal? I retrieved it from my bag and handed it to her. She flipped through the pages, her expression grave. This is serious, she murmured. These writings suggest someone attempted to bind a spirit here, a man who dabbled in dark practices. Bind a spirit? I echoed. She nodded, possibly to contain it or perhaps to trap it for other purposes. Regardless, The energy has grown unstable over time, especially with the curiosity of a child drawing it out. I felt a pang of guilt. What can we do? We need to perform a cleansing ritual, one that will release the trapped energy and protect this home. Will it be dangerous? I asked. It can be, but I will take every precaution. Lily tugged at my sleeve. Mom, I don't like this.
I knelt beside her.
I know, sweetheart, but we need to do this to make our home safe again. She looked unconvinced but nodded. Margaret began to unpack a small satchel, removing candles, herbs, and various crystals. She arranged them methodically around the hallway. I'll need absolute silence during the ritual, she instructed. You can stay, but please remain quiet. We watched as she lit the candles and began to chant in a language I didn't recognize. The air grew thick, and a low hum resonated through the walls. As the chanting intensified, the shadows around us seemed to writhe and stretch. Lily whimpered, and I held her close. Suddenly, a gust of wind extinguished the candles, plunging us into semi-darkness. The whispers returned, louder and more menacing than before. Margaret raised her voice, her chants becoming forceful commands. The shadows recoiled, swirling chaotically before converging toward the trapdoor. With a final, thunderous utterance, Margaret thrust her hands forward. A blinding flash of light erupted, and then silence. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, and the house felt lighter somehow. Margaret took a deep breath, visibly exhausted. It's done, she declared. Is it over? I asked cautiously. Yes, the spirit has been released from its binds and guided away from this place. I felt a wave of relief. Thank you. I can't express how grateful we are. She offered a tired smile. Be mindful, though. Places like this can act as beacons if not properly protected. What should we do? I'll leave you with protective charms and instructions on how to maintain the cleansing energy. As she packed up her things, Lily approached her. Will the shadows come back? Margaret knelt to meet her gaze. Not if we keep the light strong in our hearts and home. You're a brave girl, Lily. She handed Lily a small amulet on a chain. This will help keep you safe. Lily examined it, a simple stone engraved with a symbol. Thank you. After Margaret left, the house indeed felt different. Warmer, safer. Over the next few days, life began to return to normal. Lily slept through the night, and the shadows no longer haunted her waking hours. One afternoon, while cleaning out the attic, I stumbled upon an old photograph tucked away in a dusty box. It depicted a family standing in front of our house, dated over a century ago. Among them was a stern-looking man whose eyes bore an unsettling resemblance to the burlap doll we'd found. On the back of the photo, a name was scrawled, Edward Thorne. A quick search through public records revealed that Edward Thorne was the original owner of the house, a recluse rumored to have been involved in occult practices. He vanished under mysterious circumstances, and the property changed hands several times afterward. I realized that his restless spirit must have been the one trapped beneath our home. Deciding it was best to let the past rest, I placed the photo back in the box and sealed it away. That evening, as Lily and I prepared dinner together, she seemed happier than she'd been in months. Mom, she said suddenly, I think the house likes us now. I smiled. What makes you say that? It feels happier, like it's glad we're here. I ruffled her hair affectionately. Maybe it is. As we sat down to eat, I felt a renewed appreciation for our home and the peace we'd found. But deep down, A lingering unease reminded me that some doors, once opened, are not so easily closed. In the days that followed Margaret's cleansing ritual, life settled into a semblance of normalcy. Lily returned to school, her laughter filling the house once more. I immersed myself in work and household chores, eager to put the unsettling events behind us. The protective charms Margaret had left were placed strategically around the home, and I performed the maintenance rituals as instructed. One evening, about a week later, I received a call from Karen. "Hey Sarah, how are things?" she asked casually. "Much better, actually," I replied. "Lily seems happy, and the house feels lighter." "That's great to hear. Listen, I was wondering if you and Lily would like to join Emily and me for a picnic this weekend at Greenfield Park." "That sounds lovely. I'll check with Lily, but I'm sure she'd love it." "Perfect. We'll see you then." After I hung up, I noticed that the house had grown unusually quiet. The hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock, all the background noises seemed muted. Shrugging it off, I headed upstairs to check on Lily. I found her in her room, sitting on the floor with Mr. Whiskers in her lap. She was staring out the window, her expression distant. "Hey, sweetie," I said softly. "Karen invited us for a picnic this weekend. Would you like to go?" She didn't respond. "Lily," I walked over and gently touched her shoulder. She turned to look at me, her eyes reflecting a deep concern. "They're back," she whispered. Cold knot formed in my stomach. "What do you mean?" "The shadows," she nodded slowly. "They've been whispering to me again. They're angry." I felt a surge of frustration mixed with fear. But Margaret said the spirit was gone. We performed the cleansing. "It didn't work," she said flatly. "They were quiet for a while, but now they're stronger." I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "Okay, we'll call Margaret and see what else we can do." She grabbed my hand tightly. "They don't want Margaret to help. They said if we try to get rid of them again, they'll make something bad happen." A chill ran down my spine. "Did they say what?" She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm scared, Mom." I hugged her tightly. "It's going to be okay. I won't let anything happen to you." That night, after putting Lily to bed, I called Margaret. Her phone went straight to voicemail. "Margaret, this is Sarah. Please call me as soon as you can. It's urgent." I tried to distract myself by tidying up the house, but an uneasy feeling settled over me. The protective charms seemed intact, but the air felt thick and oppressive. Around midnight, I was startled by the sound of footsteps upstairs. Assuming Lily was having trouble sleeping, I headed up to check on her. "Lily," I called softly as I approached her room. Pushing the door open, I found her bed empty. Panic surged through me. "Lily!" A faint giggle echoed from down the hallway. It was a sound I didn't recognize, too deep to be my daughter's. Heart pounding, I followed the sound to the hallway where the trapdoor was located. To my horror, the panel was open, the dark void of the hidden staircase yawning before me. "Lily!" I shouted down the stairs. "Are you down there?" Silence. Grabbing a flashlight, I descended cautiously, the steps creaking under my weight. The beam illuminated the small room below, which appeared just as we'd left it. Empty except for the burlap doll still seated on the chair. "Lily, this isn't funny. Please come out." A soft rustling came from behind me. I spun around, but saw nothing. "Mom!" Lily's voice called faintly, but it sounded distant, distorted. "Where are you?" I demanded, fear tightening my throat. Down here, her voice echoed from deeper within the shadows. I hadn't noticed any passages before, but to my left, an opening now gaped in the wall, a narrow tunnel leading further underground. Against all instincts, I stepped into the passageway, the walls closing in around me. The air grew colder, and a damp, earthy smell filled my nostrils. Lily, keep talking so I can find you. Mom, hurry, her voice urged, sounding frail and frightened. I quickened my pace, the flashlight flickering as the batteries began to wane. The tunnel seemed to stretch on endlessly, twisting and turning in disorienting angles. Suddenly, the passage opened into a larger chamber. In the center stood Lily, her back to me. Relief washed over me. Oh, thank God. Lily. I rushed toward her, but as I drew near, she remained motionless. Sweetheart. I reached out to touch her shoulder. She turned slowly and I gasped. It wasn't Lily. It was the burlap doll, now life-sized, its button eyes glinting in the dim light. I stumbled back in horror, dropping the flashlight. The beam rolled across the floor, casting erratic shadows along the walls. A cacophony of whispers filled the chamber, overlapping and indecipherable. The shadows began to move, detaching from the walls and swirling around me. Desperate, I fumbled for the flashlight and scrambled back toward the tunnel. As I fled, the shadows pursued me, the whispers growing louder, more aggressive. Bursting back into the hidden room, I raced up the stairs, slamming the trapdoor shut behind me. I dragged a heavy cabinet over the panel, barricading it. Lily, I screamed, tears streaming down my face. A faint crying echoed from her bedroom. I ran to her room to find her huddled in the corner, eyes squeezed shut, hands over her ears. I'm here, I sobbed, pulling her into my arms. They tried to take me, she whimpered. They said you couldn't protect me. I won't let them, I vowed. We have to leave now. Grabbing a blanket to wrap around her, I rushed downstairs, pausing only to grab my keys and purse. As we exited the house, a deafening silence enveloped us. The air outside was still unnaturally so. We got into the car, and I locked the doors. Turning the ignition, I glanced back at the house. The windows were dark, but in one of them, I thought I saw the silhouette of a figure watching us. A tall man with a broad-brimmed hat. I sped away, not caring where we were headed as long as it was far from there. After driving aimlessly for what felt like hours, I pulled into an all-night diner parking lot. Shaking, I dialed Margaret's number again. This time she answered. Margaret, thank God, I exclaimed. Sarah, what's wrong? It's back. Whatever you did didn't work. They're trying to take Lily. She was silent for a moment. Meet me at my home address. I'll guide you from there. I scribbled down the directions she gave and set off once more. When we arrived, Margaret ushered us into her home, a modest cottage on the outskirts of town filled with the scent of sage and lavender. I'm sorry, she said solemnly. I underestimated the strength of this entity. How do we stop it? I demanded. She shook her head. It's not that simple. The spirit is bound to you now, through Lily. It won't rest until it gets what it wants. Which is? She looked at Lily with pity. To claim her. No, I snapped. There has to be another way. There might be, she conceded. But it's risky. Tell me. Margaret explained that we needed to sever the connection between Lily and the entity by confronting it directly. This would require returning to the house and performing a more powerful ritual. I glanced at Lily, who clung to my side. I don't want to go back there. I know, honey, I said softly, but we need to do this to keep you safe. She nodded reluctantly. We spent the next hour preparing, gathering supplies, reviewing the ritual steps. Margaret instructed me on my role, emphasizing the importance of following her lead precisely. As we approached the house once more, an overwhelming sense of dread settled over me. The windows were dark, and an eerie stillness hung in the air. Inside, the house felt alive with malevolent energy. The walls seemed to breathe, and the shadows shifted unnaturally. We positioned ourselves in the living room, forming a circle with candles and protective symbols. Margaret began the incantation, her voice steady and commanding. As the ritual progressed, the atmosphere grew tense. The shadows recoiled at first, but then surged forward, pressing against the invisible barrier formed by the circle. Lily, hold my hand, I instructed, squeezing her small fingers tightly. Margaret's chanting intensified, and the entity manifested, a dark, amorphous figure looming at the edge of the circle. It spoke in a voice that resonated deep within my bones. She belongs to us. She is not yours to take, Margaret retorted, her eyes fixed on the entity. You cannot protect her, it hissed. The bond is sealed. Desperation fueled my resolve. What do you want? Why her? She opened the door, it replied. She called to us. Now she must join us. Margaret glanced at me. Sarah, there's one last thing we can try, but it requires a sacrifice. Anything, I said without hesitation. You must offer something of equal value to break the bond. I looked at Lily, her eyes wide with fear. Turning back to the entity, I spoke firmly. Take me instead. Let her go, and you can have me. Mom, no, Lily cried, tears streaming down her face. It's okay, sweetheart, I whispered. I love you more than anything. The entity seemed to consider this. A soul for a soul, it agreed. Margaret's eyes widened. Sarah, are you sure? I nodded. Yes, just promise me she'll be safe. Very well, the entity intoned. Margaret began a new chant, one that seemed to resonate with the very foundations of the house. A searing pain shot through me as the entity extended a shadowy tendril toward my chest. I gasped, but remained steadfast. Let her go, I managed to say. Lily screamed, trying to pull away from Margaret, who held her back. Mom! Darkness enveloped me, the world fading into a void. My last thoughts were of Lily, hoping she would live a full, happy life free from this nightmare. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. I awoke to the sound of birds chirping and the warmth of sunlight on my face. Confused, I sat up to find myself in my bedroom, the morning light filtering through the curtains. Had it all been a dream? Rising slowly, I went downstairs to find Lily sitting at the kitchen table, eating cereal. Good morning, Mom, she greeted cheerfully. Relief flooded me. Good morning, honey. How are you feeling? Great. I had the best dream last night. We were at the beach building sandcastles. I smiled softly. That sounds wonderful. As I poured myself a cup of coffee, the events of the previous night felt distant, almost surreal. Margaret's voice echoed in my mind. A soul for a soul. I glanced at the calendar on the wall. The date was unfamiliar, not the day I remembered. Lily, what's the date today? She looked puzzled. It's August 12th, Mom. Are you okay? August 12th, that was 3 months ago. My heart raced. Had time rewound? Was this a second chance? The doorbell rang, startling me. I opened it to find Margaret standing there, looking serene. "Hello, Sarah," she said warmly. "Margaret? What's going on?" She stepped inside. "I wanted to check on you. Everything seems normal," I said hesitantly. "But the date, it's like the past few months never happened." She nodded. "The entity accepted your sacrifice but chose to release you both. Sometimes, acts of pure love can break even the strongest bonds. I don't understand. You offered yourself freely to save your daughter. In doing so, you demonstrated a strength that the entity could not corrupt. It released its hold on you and reset the clock, so to speak. Is it gone for good? As long as the door remains closed and the bond is severed, it cannot return." I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. "Thank you, Margaret. I don't know how to repay you." She smiled gently. "Live your life. Cherish your daughter. That's all the thanks I need." After she left, I embraced Lily tightly. "What's that for?" she giggled. "Just because I love you." "I love you too, Mom." As the days passed, I remained vigilant but allowed myself to believe that the nightmare was truly over. The house was filled with light and laughter once more. One evening, as I tucked Lily into bed, she looked up at me thoughtfully. "Mom, do you think shadows can be alive?" My breath caught, but I forced a smile. "I think shadows are just shadows, honey. Nothing to worry about." She nodded sleepily. "Yeah, you're probably right." I kissed her forehead and turned off the light, leaving the door slightly ajar. As I headed to my own room, I couldn't help but glance back down the hallway. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of movement, a shadow shifting unnaturally. Shaking off the feeling, I reminded myself that we were safe. But as I settled into bed, a faint whisper reached my ears. "Until we meet again." I sat up, heart pounding, but the house was silent. Lying back down, I resolved to hold on to hope. We had overcome darkness before, and we would do so again if necessary. For now, we would live our lives, embracing the light and cherishing each moment together.